Chapter 13. The Stranger. Zeta was standing before us, a mountain amongst a world of valleys. "Get up, son," he ordered the beast, who was sobbing in a puddle of his own tears and gore. As requested, he sluggishly built his strength and rose to his feet. "Father, I'm so—" In an instant, the giant's frying-pan-sized hand slashed across the son's face, as he then flopped to the floor. "Fool! Never touch prisoners. They're mine. Understand?" barked Zeta, fuming from the ears with rage. "Hello, friend," interrupted Darwin, his face still dripping with fluid. "Couldn't wait?" asked Zeta, his eyes soulless and garnet as he glared. "We are tired. Why wait?" replied Darwin. "Because I'm telling you to wait. You are my prisoner. You do what I say. Have you already forgotten how this works?" "Have you forgotten how a trial works?" exclaimed Darwin. "Hardly. And I won't make the same mistake of forgetting how your trial works tonight. It will be unforgettable. The first of its kind. The dawn of justice can finally begin. For you and your rat pack of deserters," seethed Zeta. "These deserters are your brothers," snarled Kappa. "Now that's something I'd like to forget," the giant replied. Ro was convulsing on the floor, breaking away from the twins' arms and planting his face against the cage's walls. "Please, Zeta, anything! I'll do anything! Help me! Just help!" begged Ro. His plea was admonished by the other creatures in my cage, who drew him back and duct-taped his mouth shut with their claws. "You want to leave, Ro?" asked Zeta, as he pondered the thought. His eyes rolled into the back of his head as he paced back and forth like a shark circling his prey. He then paused and looked back at us, his eyes flickering a rare sense of excitement. "Very well. Men, bring Ro to me," he ordered the guards, who solemnly followed their leader. "Back up!" yelled the guard, as he banged his head against the bars. All of us scuttled to the back of the crate, the exception being Ro. He was frothing with excitement, giddy and unhinged as he bounced up and down. "Delirious," said Darwin, shaking his head in revulsion. "Come here, brother," grunted Zeta, his hands stretched out. Ro rushed to his side, falling to his knees as he wept. "I'm sorry I left you. I betrayed my brother. I betrayed you. My master, my king." The giant's enormous claws patted the creature's back, his eyes dead as he expressed fake remorse. "Oh, yes. That's right. You are the monster who plotted to kill his baby brother, who helped murder 2 of his nephews and staged a coup against his gracious creator. A creature who left his post in the city to gallivant with the treacherous Delta, to spread your filth and gather an army. My precious Ro, you may not be so precious after all. That is, unless you deny any of these claims. You wouldn't dare deny them, would you?" asked Zeta. Ro crumbled to tears, his eyes bleeding foam that soaked Zeta's feet, almost in a fetal position, while he writhed away. "No, I don't. I did them all. I'm so very sorry," he bawled. "Turn around," Zeta ordered. Without hesitation, Ro complied, turning back towards us serene and calm. A slight smile could be seen as he beamed at us with a euphoric grin. Zeta then clamped the man's neck and twisted it. It was as simple as the bending of a straw. A minor tug, and Ro crashed to the ground, dead. "Who else?" asked Zeta, gazing his maniacal grin. "He deserved a trial," screamed Darwin, who was fuming from the ears. Have you fallen deaf? He admitted to his crimes, every single one. He was guilty. Why waste a trial? Rebuffed Zeta. That's not our way. It is not fair, croaked Kai, distraught from the display. Not fair! You speak of fair, as if you deserve it. You lost fairness the second my boy's throat was slit, the second Zeta snapped my eldest son's neck. Do you know what it feels like to lose your children? And you think it hurts to lose fairness. You don't know the meaning of loss. Until now. Stare upon our little Ro. Stare upon his loss. Feel what I felt. Let it fester and grow, and then start talking about what's fair. Not a word was spoken, not even Kappa, who mourned over his fallen companion. Darwin, on the other hand, was still rife with rage. You're lost, my brother, beyond repair. It seems the doctor has his masterpiece. At last, you've become his puppet, mocked Darwin, who was holding back tears, masking his agony with anger. Zeta then picked Ro up by the neck and dragged him on the floor like a toy as he stomped over to Darwin's cage. He then slammed the dead corpse's face against the bars, shaking the entire crate back and forth with a monstrous blow. Delta fell pale as a tear streamed down his face, his bold facade eviscerating as Ro's flesh flew in the air. Oh, don't cry, Delta. Tonight your souls will meet again, left to rot like deserters before you, left to face what you've always run away from. Justice. Silence. That's what we sat in for the next few hours until nightfall arrived. As the moon bathed the sky, a smoke littered the air, bonfire fuming in the atmosphere while Tao and Kai shook back and forth in anguish. The patrol arrived, decked out in full force. Nearly 30 of them swarmed at us like bees to a hive. Kappa shot a look at Darwin, waiting for his cue. No. We can't fight. Too weak. Too many, he faintly responded. Our hands were wrapped in a sharp twine. Bone tight as circulation plummeted in my hands. We each walked separately, accompanied by several guards, all equipped with blunt, rusty machetes. Each faction made our way up to the fort, the beasts fidgeting with glee, smiling at each other after every step. From time to time, they poked at me with the edges of their blades and tripped me to the floor, cackling like schoolgirls while doing so. Our journey ended at the gate. The haunting door swooshed open to reveal the city, which glowed yellow in the heat of a fire. The torches shot through the air, shining a spotlight on our path. All around me, creatures' eyes followed, not filled with anger or fear, but instead a pensive pity, as if I was a turkey on Thanksgiving morning being walked to my slaughter. Several had tears in their eyes as the monsters tugged me along towards the Colosseum. The seats were overflowing with statues, beings still and quiet as they observed the stage. On it stood Zeta, menacing in the air with a cleaver dangling from his hands. Below him lied my 4 companions, static on the floor, their legs wrapped in rope. My gaze upon the anarchic arena was halted as a guard kicked my legs from under me. He then twisted my calves together and finished them off with a firm and hulking knot, muttering grievances under his breath while doing so. The finishing touches upon my embarrassment as I joined my fellow ticking clocks. My heart rate soared as I shivered on the ground. Zeta, busy lecturing the crowd, his voice like a bazooka pummeling through a wall of silence. Despite this, I heard nothing. My ears fell silent as I looked through the mob, desperately trying to spot Gregory, my Lord and Savior, because once again, I needed him. From the corner of my eye, I noticed a table being lifted by the spotted beasts, a shoddy contraption decorated in dark lumber, its bark stained maroon with deep marks and scrapes. Together they planted the board onto the stage as the crowd moaned in grief. Silence! Zeta ordered as he raised his cleaver into the air. Judgment. Order. This is why we are here. To give Kai, Tau, and Kappa what they don't deserve. A chance at life. But do they deserve such a chance? For they have betrayed us all. Every single man, woman, and child who walks these city streets. Betrayed by deserters helping a traitor do his bidding. A man who killed my sons and defiled our city. Defiled our God. The man who built us all. That traitor is with us tonight. Delta faces judgment once again. A fool who came rushing back to murder the people who mercifully gave him life not long ago. We gave him a second chance, and he violated it. He returned, ready to test his soul in the city he once abandoned, and with him he brings a human into our home, an intruder of our lands, one who has killed our citizens and tarnished our world. Another of Delta's minions, another mind too poisoned to trust. They must now face judgment from you, the people. Choose wisely. He then plucked Tau from the floor and smashed his face against the table, effectively stretching the captive's arms out wide. Mercy, exile, or judgment, roared Zeta over the crowd. Swarms of words sprang through the air. Women yelling mercy and blotched monsters screaming justice at the top of their lungs. Many in the audience grew panicked. Mothers covering their children's eyes. The second Zeta's blade rose into the air. The crowd grew silent. Exile, he bellowed, and in one swift chop, cut off the arm of Tau. The poor creature rolled onto the floor, howling fits of pain as the guards took him away. The crowd fell mute while the spotted men around them rioted in laughter. Zeta, me, only me, pleaded Darwin as Kai whimpered next to him. You will be last, old friend. Zeta's gigantic boot then thundered atop Darwin's spine, springboarding a choir of shrieks. Now, the human, he shouted as I was heaved into the air. My face smacked against the table where a pond of Tau's blood was still resting, warm and fuming with a metallic filth. Almost the entire crowd screamed, Mercy! Mercy for Walter! Innocent! They yammered, while Zeta looked on, revolted by his followers' words. My neck craned around, perilously searching for Gregory, expecting him to emerge and tackle Zeta to the ground, saving the day. Alas, he was nowhere to be seen. Mercy? For a man who caused the deaths of an entire patrol, who invaded our land without request, who burns our bridges and murders my boy, heaving him into the depths. Have we forgotten the sons of our city, the boys we've raised? Do they mean nothing to us? Are my spawn beyond compassion, beyond vengeance? He asked the crowd, drunk on vexation while he blamed me for Gregory's crimes. Isn't that right, Zira? Bellowed Zeta, who catalyzed a shift in the crowd. The same boy who Gregory battled on the bridge arose from the horde, seemingly still bruised and defiled, trembling, while every eye in the city lied on his face. Walter is a murderer. What Zeta says is true. He is a danger to us all. sniffled the boy, his words clearly rehearsed, as they were phrased and said without thought, causing the boy to crumble back into his seat, while he covered his face in shame. Many in the audience appeared abashed by his comments. "That's right, my boy, a danger to us all. So, what do we say? Do we give justice to murderers?" he asked the crowd. "Mercy!" they all chanted, unfazed by the monster's argument, the beast's scare tactics failing to sway the masses, who championed for my survival. It brought him agony, while he seethed from his lips. "Fools!" Zeta muttered under his breath, while he attempted to combat his raucous breathing. "Very well. If we can't have justice, then we must compromise. Descend our little human far and away from our city. Away from our children and away from our God. We will give him to the island, and will mark him for the world to see what he is. A murderer," exclaimed Zeta, and as my body trembled in despair, one word shot through my brain. "Exile!" boomed Zeta, the cleaver now soaring high in the air. "Stop!" said a voice off in the distance, freezing Zeta and his arm mid-swing. "Zeta, listen to me. You have to stop. Do not harm this person, for he is not yours to harm. He is not yours to play with. Put down the weapon and let go of the human." I whipped my head towards the voice and saw a man, a human being standing at the entrance of the Colosseum. To my surprise, it was not Gregory Enola. Instead, a brittle-aged man stood, leaning crooked on the floor with a hand clutched to his cane. "Zeta, I will not ask you this again. Set him free. He is mine. Please, listen to my words," said the man, his voice delicately escaping his wrinkled lips. The crowd echoed "Mercy!" in joy as the cleaver fell from his hand and onto the floor. Zeta growled in defeat as he grasped the back of my head. "Justice will be yours soon, Walter Mai. Don't you fear. I will bring you what you deserve," he whispered into my ear. He then smashed my skull into the table and threw me to the floor. Vision fading to black as I witnessed Zeta storm off into the darkness. My head swelled in pain as my nose spouted a river of blood. A wave of nausea boiled inside my matter until my mind emptied into blissful nothingness. Again, unconscious, safe and away from my nightmare of reality. I woke up to the sound of hands punching away at a keyboard. My eyes flashed left and right, encapsulated by a green haze. My location? A withering office laced with shamrock wallpaper that was peeling thin with every second that passed. Above me was a fan containing dual blades, flimsily whipping in circles, its wood charred and ashed. Surrounding it was rusted pipes intertwining like a maze found outside the Overlook Hotel, on top of which were billions of dust mites that sprinkled down onto my chair, heavy like a snowfall with every swoosh of the fan's propellers. Before me sat a man, his serpentine back facing me as he typed away on a black screen. On his desk were a cascade of monitors, each displaying different tropical landscapes and animals through black and white lenses. As I watched the images, I could spot Gregory's face emerge from the nebula of desultory pictures. He was alone, flat on his back in the middle of a cell, eyes closed and resting. An optimistic presumption on my part. After some time, my attention diverted to the garb I was wearing. New clothes implanted onto me, and the etchings of dirt no longer coating my skin. For the first time in weeks, I was clean. My hair shimmered with silk, while my mouth tasted as if it was fuming with spearmint on a hot summer's day. The days of no shirt and ripped pants were over, as I now sat in a tight red and white baseball tee and a violet pair of corduroy slacks, even gifted with an old pair of running sneakers far too large for my feet. The style often reserved for grandpas with back issues, however, the spongy sole was much appreciated. While my mind wandered around the rest of the room, I nestled myself on top of the seedy silk sofa, one that was well broken in and bulbous, colored in an elephant-gray hue as a layer of smut covered most of the vibrant orange that sheened below. Muttering fumed from the man's mouth in front of me while he shuffled through papers. In his hand was a laughably grand mug, one that could hold almost an entire carton of milk. Coffee was something I hadn't thought about in days, weeks even, but to my disappointment, as I took a deep and heavy whiff of the air, the arousing aroma of caramel and mocha was not a gift my nostrils received. Instead, they were clogged, jammed to the brim with nasal fluid and blood. Desperate to smell the silver lining in my disaster of a situation, I snorted inward, any juice stored in my passages. A sound that mirrored a strangled pig as I cleansed my nose of venom that trickled down my throat and into the gutter of mucus that lived in the barrels of my lungs. My ears perked up as I noticed that my song of gangly grunts was the only sound that chimed in the dilapidated room. The man's words dissipated, and the smacking of keys halted. "Walter, my, how I've longed to meet you," exclaimed the man as he swirled around in his chair and beamed at me. A welcoming smile filled the room with warmth as my next level made its introduction. Cordial and full of cheer as he looked on at me. Patchy hair frizzled a chalk-white glow from top of his head down to his beard, swimming in his face full of freckles and ash. While his years on this earth couldn't have been any less than 70, he was still lively, eccentric even, with a whimsical smile and 32 immaculate teeth. Amber eyes darted up and down at me, refusing to blink as the man analyzed my blemished and scruffy mug. "Before we begin, would you like any refreshments? I just made a fresh batch of coffee. I can grab you a cup if you'd like." "It's not the most exquisite cup of joe, but in all fairness, I challenge you to find something better. Our island has its limitations, after all. A sufficiently ample supply of coffee beans is one of them," said the man as he rose from his chair and ambled over to the pot, resting above a lit stove on the far side of the room. A makeshift kitchen could be spotted, containing a small sink brimming with unkempt glass plates. Questions detonated in my brain, but for some reason I couldn't formulate any words. Shock and bewilderment teamed together to wrap my brain in a cemented, coated case. No thoughts could leave my head. I was imprisoned by my own delusions. "Not very chatty, are we, Walter? Very well. Hardly surprising after that nasty blow that friend of mine granted you. But perhaps your mouth is just dry. Care for some water, then?" asked the man. He then opened a cabinet and dragged out a pack of enclosed water bottles, slashed open the plastic with a butter knife, and offered one. Clean water was a luxury my body ceased to remember and something it fiercely desired. Despite this, my muscles wouldn't move. I was rooted to the chair, unwilling to give in to the stranger's gifts. "I'm not dangerous, if that's what you're worried about. The coffee isn't poisoned and the water is drinkable. Now, my friends may appear dangerous to you, but in reality they are no more violent than you and I. They simply lack guidance, and I can only be with them so long before my power over them fizzles away. Oh, you'll learn that with time." For most people, a heavy slathering of magnetism plunges through a wall of hesitation. For me, it did not. "I find it humorous how long you took to get to this point, Mr. Mai. My people were ecstatic by your arrival, and they tried to skip my entire process to bring you here. Those little devils. No patience. If it wasn't for my conditioning, they would have snatched you from the beach your first night," he laughed. "Between you and me, they were taught to think that sand is poisonous. A cruel fib if I'm being honest, but it helps me keep track of them. They can't leave if they can't touch, and so it establishes a safe perimeter. I control the island after all. I can't be in charge of the sea as well. I gave the man nothing. There was truthfully nothing for me to give. Every syllable he etched sparked more questions to form in my head. Each came and faded away with the introduction of another, and I was left to pick up the pieces, deranged beyond description. Even now, having this empty unilateral dialogue, I'm still astonished by you. You're like a famous movie star, Walter. I'm one of your biggest fans. Seeing you in this room mere feet from me, I'm not sure if I'm ever going to shake this feeling. The pure, unadulterated awe. I've watched you every day interact with my creations, testing their warts and flirting with their beauty. My work put forth on full display to someone blessed with the virtue of wonder. It was like watching Beethoven play with his first piano, just heart-wrenching. Vast potential stifling inside of you. Escaping from the minor cracks my universe has drilled into your mind. Cracks that, when opened, will release the man you have tried so hard to defeat. The one you hide from the world, in an effort to blend into its beguiled banality. Finally, Walter, I'm here to guide you. You're ready. Again, I was unfazed, still stuck to the glue of amazement another soul offered. Beyond Gregory, I thought I'd never see another human again in my life. Left for entombment within a zoo of aberrations for the rest of my existence. Admittedly, I didn't predict it would take this long for you to get to me. I was worried the jungle would swallow you whole, even requesting my men to bring you here, to make your journey easier, and yet I was wrong. I blessed you with the full experience, every stroke of brilliance inside our wonderland. You're a lucky man, Walter. Men would have spent thousands, maybe even millions to do what you've done, to see what you've seen. In due time, I even believe they will. But do not fear, my friend, I'm not going to charge you. He laughed. As the man stared at me, his joyous glee was fading. This isn't like you, Walter. Aren't you even the least bit curious regarding where you are? My mind was still racing as the man's words failed to reach me. Of course, a man like you isn't very typical. Pardon me for treating you that way. It's a nasty habit I've developed over the years. You are very different, Walter, perhaps. A situation like this pales in comparison to the discoveries and journeys your beautiful mind has conjured in the past. Perhaps something like this is tame and boring. Where's Gregory? I interrupted, as his words skewered through the cemented blockade. His smile disappeared. Gregory? Well, I don't know. You tell me, he replied. I need to see him, I emphasized. Why on earth would you want to do that? He exclaimed. I don't want to talk to you without Gregory. He needs to be here. He needs to know about you. The both of us have been through a lot, and I need to see him. I have to make sure he's okay. The old man flickered out a fresh cigarette from his pocket and lit it. Fumes filled the air as the man peered down at me, disappointed. Tell me about Gregory, said the man, who was beginning to look curious. Gregory Enola? He's a friend. He's someone who survived the crash with me. He's very important. Oh, I can see that. Yes, very important. Well, I regret to inform you I don't quite know where Gregory is. Well, that's odd, because I saw him on your screen over there, I pointed out. curious how the man would deflect. Pressed a button and effectively shut off all the monitors at once. You say you want to see Gregory. Well, it seems like it's all up to you whether you ever see him again. You said his last name was Enola, yes? I nodded. Ah, I knew that name was familiar. He was on your flight. You met him, I presume. I nodded again. I had little desire being interviewed by the stranger. Nodding was more than enough information in my eyes. I was worried what he would do with anything more. Regardless, you didn't answer my question. Who is this Gregory Enola you met? What did he reveal about himself? He didn't have to reveal anything. Nothing was being hidden or put in the dark. He survived the crash and found refuge on this island. Just like me, I said. Oh, just like you. So he's similar to you. Do you share common interests? He asked. The man was confusing me. I reckon that was his intention. No, he's nothing like me. He flickered an emotion of surprise that subsided the moment he inhaled another dose of rat poison. How peculiar! That's awfully rare for someone like you. Now, tell me this, Walter. What did Gregory tell you about me? Word for word. What? Nothing, I rebuffed. The man leaned forward with a gleaming stare, prying for another answer. Well, he never mentioned anything, at least. No. Definitely not. I'm sure he doesn't know who you are or what you do. If he had any idea, he would have given me at least an idea. He would try to get help if he knew that you were here. I'm sure of it. His smile reemerged. Sure are we, commented the man, his eyes brimming with contempt. They rarely blinked, fuming a chestnut color fading into a dark gray, matching the rest of his body. Wrinkled and frail he sat, barely moving his neck as he spoke. I wonder why he never told you. How would something like that benefit him? I'll never know. Our meeting, you and I, it was inevitable, Walter. He knew that. He isn't the brightest man, I'm sure you already know. From what I gather, there's not much between that man's ears. Well, nothing beyond a dim, egocentric, craven boy that wears a mask designed for a man. He disappointed me the moment I met him. Imagine that. Making fun of Gregory was an act this man didn't deserve. It was mine, and he was ruining it. You know nothing about him, I exclaimed, now unable to shadow my annoyance. I know nothing. Whoa, that's a hyperbolic accusation, Mr. Mai. If you'd give me a few seconds, I'm sure I could remedy your disbelief. He then gradually opened a drawer on his desk. Following several long seconds, a file was plucked from his folder. He coughed, following another throaty inhale, and put on a pair of crooked glasses. Gregory Enola, age 50, born April 1st, 1967, height 6'4", weight 215 pounds, eye color blue, hair black, social security number 552385014. Must I go on? I was unimpressed. That doesn't prove he knows you. It only proves that you know him. Tell me something that piece of paper doesn't tell you. Tell me something that's actually about Gregory, not database numbers and facts. The man flicked his cigarette onto the ground and stomped on it as his eye shot back up at me. Oh, you are clever. There's no doubt about that. I'm tad argumentative, but anyone who's anything in this life is just that. Now, how can I prove Gregory knows me? That's a good question. He is a kind man, but fixated upon perfection derived from the pages in his religion. The man is distraught about his son, who died. Well, in his mind died. In truth, he was only paralyzed, but hey, who am I to judge? He avoids talking about a wife who took her own life. I was a raging alcoholic before he found Christ again. I know him very well, Mr. Mai, more than you do yourself. I was struggling to cope with the man's insolence. His brash tone of voice grated at the seams of my matter. He reminded me of professors of old, arrogant and warped in their bubble of brilliance, presumed acumen their degrees confirmed, accomplishments that stroked and sprouted an ego too large for that small a man. All these adages, and yet ignorant to the most important form of intelligence there is, social intelligence. He reminded me of myself, eliciting instant hatred. When did he tell you this? I asked. The man's eyes rolled. Does it matter? He replied. Considering I ask, considering how I'm a movie star in your eyes, yes, it does matter. I learned that information following hours upon hours of conversing with him. I'm not an alien, Walter. I didn't pry that from his brain. We're friends, he and I. We get along. A lie. I understood Gregory more than I understood anyone else in my life. Precious secrets were earned. He didn't hand them out like they were flyers on the street. Gregory wasn't a man who would become friends with a narcissistic joker like the one who sat before me. I know what you're thinking too. Isn't that exactly what I am? Yep, but I'm an exception. When two people are torpedoed into a deserted hellhole, they're forced to either become friends or kill each other off. And I couldn't find any handguns lying around the beaches, so I did what I had to do. So you tortured him? I questioned. It was the only logical solution I could think of. His response was silence. He just removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes, exhaling a deep breath of dismay. This would have been a lot easier if he simply brought you here with him. The daft buffoon took ages to get you here in the first place, and put his faith in Zeta not to kill you. He's lucky I was there in time. Otherwise... Boy. Well, regardless, he's not your problem anymore. And here I thought sending my soldiers after you would light a fire under him. It seems I'd to do all the work myself. Hardly a surprise. I'm not talking to you unless I see him, I exclaimed, annoyed the man was attempting to break my trust as if I was easy to fool. You don't trust me? Very wise. Trust should be earned, not freely given, especially to a stranger. Rest assured, Walter, I am not a stranger to you. We may have never met before, but if my assumptions are correct, they often are, then I may know more about you than you know about yourself. And just like that, the man struck a chord. I could never resist another human's take on me. Even when they were wildly inaccurate, I'd often find them fascinating. Go on, then. What are your assumptions? I asked. Okay. Your entire life was spent living in a world populated by dull, selfish... They plagued your daily... There, you became conditioned. As you aged, you no longer resisted their futility. Instead, you let it bleed through your veins and corrupt you. You wanted to become part of their whole. After a while, you realized that conformity was the problem, not you. A classic tactic. You see, people are quick to say they reject conformity, while in truth, conformity rejected them. To cope with this tragedy, they lie to themselves, Walter. Bare-faced lies that tell them to despise what people want, because deep down they know they'll never be wanted. That was you, Walter, a man who could never be wanted. That is, until I found you. Suddenly, you are not just a man who is wanted, but also a man who is needed. The man's assumptions were beyond accurate. Almost too accurate, as if my suspicions could rise any higher. The man was bright, and he thought it would make me like him. It made me fear him. Please, I just want to see Gregory, I re-emphasized, growing nervous that there wasn't a shred of Gregory left to see. Walter, following an unplanned excursion, one might say escape, you arrive at the doorstep of a land colonized by marvelous creatures, unthinkable to the human brain. Creatures who are not exposed to the virus that has infected an aging, dying world. Now that you're in the presence of someone who can explain you the reason for their existence, you waste your time bickering over the life of one of those same pathetic monsters, the last remaining from the doldrums of your closet. He's now gone, and yet you want him back. Ignore him, Walter. Start asking better questions. Then I'll settle your worries about our old friend. In my face dangled an alluring singing carrot, one that was offering a rabbit hole of answers and excitement. To bite that carrot, I had to push aside Gregory. It was the old man's tactic, a transparent, obvious ploy to divert my attention from something he wanted to talk about. Despite my awareness of his tricks, I took the bait. I couldn't deprive my id of adventure and exploration. Alright, fine. Tell me about them. What are they? I asked the man, giving in to his wishes. He chuckled to himself as he lit another cigarette and smirked. The creations you've met on your journey are some of the greatest inventions in human history. Experiments that have advanced the natural world and exceeded the expectations of the engineers who constructed them. On this island, we were free to indulge ourselves in all the capacities of scientific wisdom and what it can offer. And with it, we could build upon God's work and make it better. Much, much better, Walter. Are they? These demons you classify as inventive creatures. You're proud of what you've done. These creations, hyper-aggressive brutes that chase and attack anything that walks, devoid of logic and reason, following the orders of a truck who communicates with his fists rather than his mouth. That's your pride and joy? I expected to scowl, but instead received another bright, smug smile. Funny how confirmation bias can desecrate even the most extraordinary of minds. You call them demons. Interesting. That's what Gregory used to call them. He never appreciated their abilities. He scorned them, wrote them off as atrocities that violated the work of God. Human-made perfection evolved beyond anything our world has ever seen. In his eyes, that shouldn't exist. And that's because his vision blurs from the limitation his strictures have placed on him. In those around him, he doesn't know the potential that we hold. The mad scientist had claimed that he was better than a god. To be frank, narcissistic personality disorder is a dreadful disease. When smudged all over the man's face, the result was no different. Alright, Tesla, settle down. You take full credit for these supposed advanced beings, and yet I don't understand how they were built. It's possible you found them living on the island, a hidden treasure hiding in a desolate wonderland. I exclaimed. He was looking delighted as he waved his hands in a frenzy. Heavens no! I wouldn't lie about something like this. Of course, I'd help. I was part of a select team instructed to stretch and manipulate the spectrums of genetics and zoology. There were dozens of us, Walter, brilliant minds, paid handsomely to entertain ourselves with limitless resources, gifted with a barren tropical wasteland we could use as our own personal sandbox. Now, the latter part was only appealing to myself and a few others. Understandably, most people can't disappear from their own personal worlds. Myself, well, I'm an outlier, of course. As a group, we never thought it would go anywhere, but when we found out our lack of constraints, we couldn't resist experimenting, he said. He could smell my perplexity. Unhinged and unwavering, it beamed from my face. Look, Walter, evolution is a long, tenuous loop that feeds on casualties and years of trial and error. In layman's terms, we found a shortcut. Genetically engineer the best qualities found in species around the globe and combine them into one creature. No longer were we chained to the limitations of ethics and morals, obstructive human constructs that blind us from the only goal that matters. Improvement, blurted the man, flushed from his own elation. I mean, that sounds all nice and grandiose, but if those were your intentions, then I don't understand the secrecy. You'd be celebrated. Front page news. From what I understand, you expect me to accept your cognitive dissonance as fact. But let's be honest here. This is the point where you tell me the catch. The reason you're hiding under a rock, I replied. Well, we butchered and mangled many animals until our creations could be born, but don't question for a second our motivations. Our goal was to use our capabilities to change the world for the better. And from what I've gathered, you're curious regarding the origin of my creations, not the ethical implications. It's okay to be interested in my work, Walter. Validating my assumptions doesn't make you a weak or lesser person. I gave in to his cavalier sentiment and gave him exactly what he wanted. Fine, I'm interested, I said through gritted teeth. Good, you should be. The man then swooshed his chair around and fired away at his keyboard, launching the main central monitor to fizzle with snowy static. He then shoved a VHS through a slot below and pressed play. On the screen were a group of young chemists in the lab. Some were busy tinkering with test tubes, bubbling and fizzing every color under the sun. A couple in the middle of the screen were dancing in their pink and white checkered lab coats while they fogged up each other's safety goggles. A few others simply measured and smirked while they joked with the cameramen. The picture eventually panned to a tank full of amphibians, hopping and dancing in a makeshift ecosystem, splattered with bright, bulging patterns. A familiar sight. Before Zeta or any of his followers were born, our studies were much simpler. For example, one of our first projects was creating a new and safe house pet. We were young, Walter. It was an innocent prospect. We began with frogs, taking what we thought were desirable features like vivid spots, miniature bodies that could fit atop a child's palm, and so forth. Essentially dart frogs, but of course they possess a volatile flaw, which makes them impossible to live with. Over time, we were able to deconstruct and remove any form of poison that ran through their veins. They became harmless, and through behavioral training, less aggressive. A rare few had children who shared similar characteristics, and after a while our project was complete. When we displayed our results to our superiors, they were impressed, but not fully satisfied with our work's potential. There were remarkable accomplishments, but far too expensive to produce on a large scale, and so we released the remaining few onto the island and moved forward, now with the knowledge of our capabilities, and with higher ambition. The film then centered on an interview with a charmingly dashing woman who popped from the screen, her curly brown hair and bright green eyes inching closer towards the camera, while she laughed and puckered her bright red lips. It was my first time seeing a woman in ages. It felt foreign, like an alien species. Nevertheless, her sight was stifled as the stranger exhaled a heavy yawn and paused to screen, flicking off the monitor while he remedied his breathing. He then plucked a Rubik's Cube from his desk and handed it to me. "I've told this story many times, so please, mess this up for me while you wait. The multitasking stimulates my brain, makes retreaded stories like this much more palpable for myself. Please, do an old man a favor. Indulge me." As if the man could be any odder. Now, too far down the rabbit hole to turn back, I complied and started twisting and shifting the toy. Through distracted words, he continued. "You've met many of our other attempts for glory, trying to rewrite history by creating the next dinosaur. Foolish, as if we could train such a varmint, building a monstrous bird that when trained could transport humans anywhere in the sky. A delusion, an innovative idea that grew stale with advances in technology. It's the same reasoning behind the failure of our squid initiative, and my colleague's own personal favorite combining aspects of canines and bears to prance around in zoos. And you think Zeta is violent? Put yourself in a room with one of them. You could count on one hand how many seconds you'd last." "So you released them onto the island?" I asked. Instead of a response, he reached out his hand for the cube and smiled as I handed it back to him. He then deconstructed my work and continued his blabbering. "I sure did. What's the harm in that?" he replied. "These dangerous creatures are free to revel in the land you populate and massacre anyone they see." "That's not a problem in your eyes?" I exclaimed, astonished how someone so intelligent could be so dim. "Oh, you reckon we should have executed them? Millions of dollars left to hang? Don't be daft. We let them join evolution, and with our land we could observe their progress, let them grow at their own pleasure, but no longer were the days where we could speed down a dead end. We had to build towards something of value, something we could predict, an item that would be worth the government's time. Submissive, hyper-intelligent slaves? Now that was impossible to ignore. Not only that, a creature immune to illness and cancer, fit beyond even the strongest of creatures, durable to the extent that they can live until well over 100 years, and capable of becoming the most intelligent form of life our world has ever seen? He was stifling in his chair, not out of anger, but warped in his own jubilation, feasting on his own reveries, naive to their nonsensical taste. I paused, doing my best to comprehend the magnitude of his words. "Let's say that's true. Why would that type of creature be needed? I don't understand the purpose of creating walking, talking nukes that can outwit and slaughter humans with their bare hands. They are slaves, Walter. A lack of disdain is their biggest flaw, and an issue humans most certainly do not have. They're obedient to proper instruction and resilient. Waiting before us is a tool that can be used to work our fields, grow our crops, and fight our wars. No longer are the days of human blood being spilled on the battlefield. With my creations, we'll be able to sit back and watch." I laughed. You could have waited a few years and let robotics just take care of that problem. You spend decades building something that people have been building for quite some time. Mindless slaves with flesh are no different from mindless slaves with steels and wires. For a moment he pondered my words, something he skipped over most of the time. He then nodded his head and continued. "I concede a soldier's life is a waste of their intelligence. In the eyes of the government, though, it is far from a waste of resources. Consider the context as to when our work began. The 60s was a time for ingenuity and rapid change. We had to be at the forefront. Compliant superhumans would plunge us centuries forward, while robotics can be tinkered with at the flip of a switch. Classical conditioning, though, that is very different. It can take years to complete and destroy, and when used with my creations, one could build an empire." I'd be lying if I said I wasn't intrigued. A being better than a human wasn't all that impressive, though. It's a pretty low bar to hurdle. All that said, it confirmed my suspicion that the beasts living around me were more complicated than Gregory once thought, a deeper layer waiting to be delved into. And yet I remain unconvinced. Walter, I'm talking to you about achieving perfection, not settling for a lesser subject. Absolute perfection. He then showed me the cube in his hands and spun it around. See? Not one square out of place, because if it were, I would have been wasting my time trying to fix a problem with an unfinished solution. But no, I don't accept that. I twisted and turned until my goal was complete. It was complex to do, and many lesser men would have given up, but I am not a lesser man, Walt. I've learned the methods, and I perfected them. It's to the point where I replicate perfection time and time again. My main point here is that with you, I think that I can achieve that perfection on a wide scale. But we'd have to work together. Look, I wish what you were saying was true. In an ideal world, it would be. Yet, I struggle to wrap my head around the thought that ingenious creatures would follow a barbarian, blindly listen to his demands and give in to his strength. If they can't learn value in numbers, how can they fight in wars and act with reason? He put his hand up for me to stop and rose from his seat. I can sit here with you all day and splurge exposition and knowledge into your likely concussed brain, or I can do what I should have done to begin with. I can just show you. He then left the confines of his desk and walked to the back of the office. It was a pigsty, cluttered with old buckets, umbrellas, ashtrays, and for some reason a gimped rainbow kite. Amongst the cloud of filth was a doorway, a lavender-coated skin, wooden, with a small oval window that allowed the faintest of light. As he arrived at the doorknob, he paused and flashed his eyes back at me, gleaming a wicked grin while doing so. "This is going to be fun," he exclaimed, and then whirled the door wide open.